Hello, I'm Toshi. I've been building SaaS products for the past 17 years, 10 years as a developer, and the last seven as a product manager. I've built products that have scaled to multiple countries and multiple more use cases. I specialize in applying AI and ML techniques to build products that solve real world problems. At the moment, I'm rethinking how internal tooling can change the workplace culture. In this session, we are going to talk about how we build SaaS products that scale easily. And I hope I'm able to share some of my learnings along the way. So, the topics that we will cover today are what is scaling, how SaaS scaling is different, and what are the verticals of a SaaS scaling, and then go deeper and understand some principles of effective scaling as well. So, what is scaling? Scaling is the stage of a product journey when we have achieved a product market fit, we start seeing some traction from the market, and now we want to grow fast. The PMF is hopefully achieved, and it must have been achieved with a very laser focus towards a potentially small market. But now we want to go large. We want to serve a lot of users and, of course, grow our revenue. Overall, scaling can be defined as delivering exponentially more revenue without exponentially more costs. The basic axis of scaling thereby are how do you increase your user base, how do you get more revenue per user, or how you cut down your cost and increase your efficiencies. When you are increasing your user base, you want to bring more visitors to the product. When you are increasing your revenue, you want to have a larger cart value. You want your existing clients to be paying more as well. So these basically form the various vectors of scaling. We'll take up some examples on how SaaS scaling is different and how these basic principles translate into a couple of examples in the SaaS scaling space. So how is SaaS scaling different? Generally, when you have achieved your PMF, you have achieved it with a very sharp, laser-focused audience. This means that when you start seeing traction, a lot of larger logos are interested in your product also. And with larger logos come larger volumes. And with that, your product should scale to those larger volumes almost immediately. SaaS products also have fairly complex user flows. They need to synthesize a lot of data. It's not a typical B2C conversion funnel. It's not a typical sales funnel. You will have multiple screens, multiple dashboards, multiple workflows within a single product itself. And everything needs to scale. It's not just one flow that you need to scale, everything needs to scale. Products are also used in workspace settings, so you need to comply with the regulatory requirement, with the audit trailing requirement, and any such requirement that are required at a workplace setting. You should build practices like inadvertently, the data shouldn't be deleted, that people should not be misusing the system in any manner. Also, in the end, these tools improve productivity of the users. They want to get their work done faster and better, and which means that your product needs to respond to their expectations also. They need to be fast, they need to be secure, and they need to make work easier. Sometimes it's not easy to do, specifically when you are increasing your scale very, very fast. So we'll go through a couple of examples of how typically SaaS products scale. One of the most common lever that is applied when we scale a SaaS product is expanding geographies. More often than not, the use case that you are solving can be applied in a global context. It's not just for a particular geography that you would be limited to. So you want to expand to more geographies. You might want to introduce more price points also. You might want to have a simple, very basic version of your product, almost as a free, to acquire a lot of customers so that they try your product, that they feel acquainted with it. And you might want to have a larger price point also, maybe an enterprise version or a pro version of your product, which is for more advanced, more pro, and more engaged users. So you want different price points. This also brings in different streams of revenue. You can definitely price them differently, and thereby multiple revenue streams will come for each of these packages. You might want to introduce more product lines. Say your product is doing just X. Let's take an example here. Now, let's look at Figma. Figma started as a designer's tool. It helps designers create designs and share designs very easily. But Figma realized that there are related audiences that may be interested in the product. During the COVID situation, they launched FigJam as a tooling itself, which was a common whiteboarding product. Now, this brought another stream of revenue for the same company with not that massive an effort, and they went to demographics which are nearer to the designer audience. So you may want to launch newer product lines as well. Of course, you want to increase the number of users using your product, the transactions that are flowing through the product, the overall activity. Even if you're a Slack, sending messages, creating channels, talking in channels, all of that you want to increase. If people love your product, you can definitely charge them higher. And of course, your word of mouth spreads, your credibility spreads, and thereby you can acquire more consumers. You can also expand your product to more demographics. So going back to a Figma example, they expanded the product. They went out of the designer persona, who is just maybe 5 to 10% of a company, and expanded themselves to be more useful for everybody in the company. Whiteboarding is a thing that from leaders to product managers to engineers, everybody uses. So they wanted to expand the user base within a company itself, and that can be very easily achieved if you broaden your demographics while sticking to your core strong points. Integrations also serve as one of the biggest levers for scaling also. You can make yourself available, make your product available in the typical marketplaces. You can make your product available on a Slack marketplace, a Salesforce marketplace, and that can bring partnerships that can easily help you with onboarding. We're going to go in much more deeper into integrations in the next few slides. But these are the vectors that you will see how we can easily achieve by putting in some small efforts at the start of the journey of the product itself, so that when it's time to scale, you don't have to do a lot. So looking at a couple of examples to understand this. In this particular example, a salesperson is asking to expand the product to a newer geography. They want to expand to Indonesia, Thailand, and of course, the product manager is definitely interested that new people will come and there will be more users using the product, more revenue will be coming. But there is a challenge. In both Indonesia and Thailand, the product would not be very effective unless and until it is available in the local languages. And to support that local language on a dashboard-based product is a long build. You will lose the revenue, you will lose the traction and the GTM that you have already built in the market, and you may not want to say no to those leads. Another example of problems that happen at scaling time, I have. Sometimes customer success comes to us and talks about really large clients asking us to do certain custom builds for them. Because this is a large client, you want to keep them happy, you want to keep them engaged, and sometimes it's not even something that makes sense for your product, and sometimes it makes sense for your product, but it just feels like nobody else is going to use this particular feature. So should I invest in building this, or should I not invest in building this? How do we handle such cases? How do we handle such cases of custom requirements that come, that are legitimate, that are logical, that will definitely improve the experience of those thousands of users from this big client, but may not be useful for the rest of the audience. So how do we handle such situations? We're going to go into deeper understanding of these particular situations and how do we handle them better. Principles of easy scaling. We're going to talk about 5 principles today, which if we invest a little bit early on, we will be able to scale much faster to larger audiences, to larger clients very easily, and newer geographies as well. So let's look at them one by one. Please ensure that you make your product configurable. Why? Why should we make our product configurable? At a very basic level, you will need this to define various packages of your product. You may have started off by just trying to get your clients to pay any bit for your product and see whether they like your product enough to pay that value that you're asking for. But eventually you want various packages of your product, and to support these packages, you would want that features are tied with the configurations. You can enable them, disable them, you can easily move clients through various tiers of your product, and that's why you need configurations in your product. Sometimes it is also a case where you go to different clients while the fundamental problem that you are solving is a need that they have, a very strong need that they have, but their business models might be just slightly different. Their matrices that they're tracking might be slightly different. The outcomes they're expecting might be slightly different. The configurations that they want might be slightly different. And you would want to support these for different clients. Trust me, it's much easier to make configuration than convince a 1,000-member org that whatever you call as a PO in a SAP system is now called as an order in your new system. It's very difficult to train and ensure that the training is successful and always there in the ecosystem of your client also. So here, customizations are something that we want to avoid, and configurations is how we will be able to support multiple such clients. Lastly, even within a client, there might be multiple use cases. Different geographies may have a different use case, different business verticals may have a different use case. For example, let's say you have a payroll system. Maybe the leadership layer has a different pay package and a different pay structure. Maybe the team sitting in Singapore has a different pay structure. They will definitely be having at least different tax implications and tax calculations. You wouldn't want that only half of your client base or 10% of your client base is using your product because you just can't support the nuances that are required for the different cohorts of users, even within a client. So that's why we need the products to be configurable. So how do we make the products configurable? First of all, always choose configuration over customization. Please do not pick up builds which are very custom for a particular use case unless and until there is a dire need to do that. Build for all the possibilities and logical possibilities and disable them via specific configurations for a particular client. You need to ensure that these files or these configuration areas are easily editable, and you can even ensure that your sales team, your customer success teams and other teams can edit and create these configurations specifically for the client. Configurations can be defined at a client level, at a cohort level, and at an individual level as well, which means that typically outcome-related settings, language, nomenclature, other such settings, you would want to keep it at a client-level configuration. This ensures that there is a consistency amongst all the users of that company also. At a cohort level, you want to keep region or division specific nuances. You may have specific features available for, say, the tech team, and those to be disabled maybe for the HR team. So you can do it at a cohort level also. These should ideally override whatever is there at a client level. And lastly, some configurations are best left at a user level. For example, notifications changes. How do they want a particular table to look like? Certain ways of whether they want an email preference or a Slack notification preference. Things like these can be left at a user level configuration also. You should also try to make the product highly integrable. And this is an investment that's best done at the very initial stages of the product. First of all, integration is one of the biggest retention levers that you can have. If your product is integrated within the tech stack of a company, if whatever tools they are using already talk to your tool, it's very difficult to uproot your product. They would not like to uproot and change the expectations and the flows for all of their employees also. So it's a great retention lever. It also ensures that there is consistency in the data that is flowing into the system. By that, I mean, say some audit information is flowing into your system from a sales booking app. You don't want that every time an audit comes, somebody downloads it and then uploads it into the system. There is a higher likelihood that there will be mistakes, there will be manual errors. If this data directly flows into the system, somebody's life is getting much easier. They don't have to do boring job of download and upload. Plus, we are getting correct, relevant, and accurate data. So at any time anybody comes to your product, your data is live and correct. They derive some information out of the product also. Also, definitely it helps with the smoothest onboarding. Learning a new product is always a big deal. There is always resistance to adopting something new. And if they see already things that they are familiar with, data that they are familiar with, maybe better arranged in your product, higher likelihood that people will adopt your product much, much faster. So let's look at how we make products integrable. First of all, be API first from day one. It doesn't matter whether you are exposing the APIs today or not exposing the APIs today. Just ensure that your APIs are clean and they can be potentially exposed whenever you need to. Things grow. You will have more and more and more APIs getting added as your product gets bigger. So it's best to ensure that you start clean APIs being available at a very small and early stage itself. Your front end and back end should be decoupled. You should ensure that there are practices, that your PRDs, the requirements documents, your tech practices always have the sections for ensuring what is the impact on the APIs. Will my API remain backward compatible? What will be the behavior? Am I adding a field? Am I deleting a field? What's happening there? This practice will yield to a lot of ease and success later on. It's not just about product being integrable, but people being able to use those integrations also. Also, if possible, track the API usage. It's one of the good things you can anyways do for the security of your product, but ensure that how many calls are coming in is sort of trackable in your product. Earlier, you won't need it, but at a later point of time, you may want to charge your clients by their API usage also. Specifically, the larger ones which bring in the maximum load into your system, you might want to include that as a part of your pricing structure also. Next is multi-language support, localization support also. Why do you need this? Of course, you're going to expand in geographies. You want to sell your product to the entire world if possible. And generally, most SaaS products are not limited via geographical limitation. They solve problems which are independent of these sort of nuances. So what you want to do is ensure that it's very easy to launch into a newer geography, as easy as you can make it. Even within a current geography, right? Say you're working inside India, there are multiple languages already existing in India. And if your product is used by a persona which is not conversant in English, you want to ensure that the product is effectively utilized by these personas also. You might be able to get by English maybe in the tier 1 cities, but you will not be very successful in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities with your product. So that's why you definitely need localization support. And of course, if you are growing bigger, you will have clients which by themselves are multinational. So they'll have teams sitting across the country and across the globe as well. And you want them to all use your product effectively. You don't want that team sitting in France can't use the product because they are not so conversant in English. So how do we build for multi-language support? My recommendation would be to focus on your web and desktop-based products because that's where the coding practices doesn't help us very well. In the mobile space, specifically iOS, Android ecosystem, there are already coding practices that help us define and extract all of the strings out from the entire front end, extract all of the messages out into a file, and they help us build those products as very, very easily localizable. But these practices are not that prevalent in the web and desktop space. So please pay double emphasis on that space as well. You would want to extract all your front-end text, all your error messages into a single text file. Even if you don't support 2 languages today, just do that so that when you have to support multiple languages, it's just a matter of translating that file. And from a coding perspective, you would be good to go. But from a design perspective, there'll be still some challenges. Different languages have different width, different languages talk about the same word in a different manner. So you might want to leave some buffers out in your design and not make everything too cluttered and too close together from the start, and build that as a practice in your design team itself. So that tomorrow when you need to scale and add newer languages, you are able to first of all create and translate that one single configuration file, test it out in your product, see whether the design is scaling, maybe make comments to 1 or 2 components where it is not scaling, and release out into the ecosystem. This is way much faster than building a specific product for a newer geography, and definitely much faster than doing an entire build again. The nuances don't just end at languages. You want to support multiple currencies, multiple regional regulations, and other specific things, even government regulations, GDPR regulations for a particular geography also. So these are the things that you would want to consider just before releasing your product into a newer geography. Another aspect that is very important is having a role-based build. Typically, SaaS products being used in a workspace setting already need to support multiple personas. You have a hierarchy in the organization, which means that there will be employees, there will be managers with larger access, maybe managing multiple teams together, and definitely there will be administrators and leaders. Build for these roles from the start. That would be the recommendation. You will need it when you expand your personas. You add another product manager persona, you add another creator persona, you add another marketer persona. It will be just a role that needs to be added into the system. Sometimes because of the hierarchy of the organization, and when you are looking at a larger sized organization also, you would want certain accesses to be limited to certain personas also. Typically, as an example, see, the performance reviews are something between an individual and their manager, but the HR also needs access, and only specific HR needs access to look at those performance reviews also. So when you build for that HR role, you would want to associate them with these particular features. Of course, expanding to multiple demographics is very, very easy when you build for roles in your product from the start. You can have editor persona, you can have commenter persona. This is typically what happens in Jira today, even in Figma today. All of these have different personas and different features enabled and disabled depending upon what is your role in the system. The role-based build means that roles uh, define what data and what features you have access to. It's not the user, it's not a single user ID that gets access to things, it's a role that gets access to things. So start from the day one to define the user, the manager, the admin persona as a role in the product from the start. I have seen people tend to do at least the admin persona, but they do it in a not so graceful manner. We'll say that given that you start with 3, it's more likely that you will start to do in a very scalable manner instead of just putting an if statement that if admin give access to this, but it will be much more richer if you start with 3 personas at least and define them as roles and give access or remove access depending upon what role the person is at. You should, of course, define these as a practice, as a part of your PRD template. How does this new feature affect the role? Does the feature get enabled for each role, for a specific role? Does it changes depending upon the role? Should be a part of your template for the product requirements itself. And in the end, your data should be tied to the roles also. So access limitations, granting access to certain data, granting access to a team should be dependent upon what is your role in the system. Last but not the least, you should build for dynamically managing these roles and providing and removing people from the roles also. People come into an organization and leave the organization way too often than we imagine. And this happens very frequently the larger the organization is. You do not want an admin to be all the time seeing, oh, there is a new employee has come, let me give him access to these things. Instead, it should be very easy that I can define a rule that says that, oh, anybody who has joined the HR team, please give them an HR role. Anybody who has joined the HR team at a leadership position, please give them an HR administrator role by default. So you need to be able to define these rules in the system. It's not just a great experience for your administrator, it's a great experience for the new user who is onboarding into your product also. Their interface is customized now automatically without them asking 5 different people according to what that should be, what permissions they should have, what data they should be looking at, what dashboards they should have view to. It's customized already according to their role. Of course, it helps when people leave the organization also. Automatic rules ensure that the accesses are removed also very time. Lastly, we're going to talk about volume scaling. This is the strongest indicator that your product is getting liked in the market and you're going to grow very, very fast. With large clients, a lot of users are going to come to the product. A lot of large clients are going to come to the product. So a lot more users are going to use your product simultaneously now. They might bring in larger volumes. So individual user might bring in larger volumes and transactions into the system also. And you want to ensure that you support all of these clients simultaneously while maintaining your low latency, while ensuring that your product is available, it doesn't slow down, there is not a lot of buffering time. You are able to support all of the scale with the growing size of your client base also. It builds credibility in the market if your product scales well. And by scaling well, it is not just about handling the larger volumes, but handling it well as well. Your design should also scale to the large volumes. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into understanding this aspect. First principle, This is the next slide. Um, First principle for volume scaling is write beautiful code and a scalable design. Nothing can beat a beautifully written, concurrent, multi-tenant system. Uh, that is the basic of it all. If that needs work, please invest that effort as early as possible. The smaller the code base, the more easy you will be able to do this. And scale your volume support. You don't want people to be waiting for the system to respond just because they have just entered a large data into the system. It doesn't matter whether you have not handled any order above maybe a 500 size in one single upload. You have to scale to that 5,000 or 10,000 requirement when the clients want to. So nothing beats a great and well written code. Another thing that we should invest in is a brilliant search experience. Whenever users are shown a large amount of data, the first thing that they need to do is search. It's impossible to otherwise find anything when you are looking at, say, a dashboard with 50,000 data points, maybe 200 paginated pages. You want to search, you want to sort, you want to filter your information to be able to make some understanding to actually do what you're intended to do also. Like, let's take an example, right? Say your dashboard has a lot of orders, and one of the primary thing that your client does is at the end of the day look at how many orders got cancelled. If there are 50,000 orders on the database and they have to literally go through each of them to find it, it is going to be painful. The best you can do is maybe put a pie chart, a clickable pie chart, which is by status, so they can see, oh, these many got delivered, these many got cancelled, these many are maybe still pending. And if that is clickable, they can click on the cancelled pie and they can see all the cancelled orders, maybe go deeper within that if they need to, or download it, or do whatever they need to do with it. But this is how your design should scale. This may not be a requirement if there are just 50 orders in a day, but this will be a requirement when there are a lot of orders going through the system. Also, one of the crucial things to remember is look at each entity. By entity, I mean each cohesive unit that you have on your product, and see at to what level will this scale to. What is the maximum size this can go to? And design accordingly. And by that I mean, let's take an example again. Let's say that you are the product manager of a Miro board, and you're designing how many people would be maybe simultaneously editing a Miro board. Miro board is generally used within a team, so 50 users maximum, maybe 100 users will be simultaneously editing a Miro board. More than that will become a chaos, honestly. So that's sort of the physical max you will go to, a single Miro board being edited. But if you ask me, how many Miro boards will a client create? I don't have a good answer. It depends upon the size of the company, the number of teams that are using my product, the number of years I have been serving them, and the number of Miro boards that people will have in the system will grow according to that. So I don't have a great limit to it. And that's why I need to ensure that people look at the most relevant and the most important Miro boards at all time. And this is what designing for scale is all about. Figure out which entities are going to scale. Do you know the limitations of each? And if not, figure out how you build for that scope of design. And last but not the least, of course, your access permissions and requirements around access permissions are going to compound as you scale. So build granular level permission infrastructure so that you can limit and provide access to users as per the requirement. Data permissions are not just a compliance requirement or a policy requirement. Sometimes it even becomes just a decluttering requirement. I want to subscribe and unsubscribe to something. Like, there are so many Slack channels in my Slack dashboard, right? I don't want to all of them to send me notifications. I want to mute some of them. I want to archive some of them. Build infrastructure for that. because these are the elements that's going to scale and improve your user experience as you scale also. So that's all that we have for today. Thank you for taking time and listening to me. I hope you have learned something new today. Thank you.